Hotep, you guys. Welcome back to the Chosen Few channel. I'm your host, Matthew Daniels, the writer, author, scribe, and bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm, world. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. And remember, I am an author. Click the link in the description, go to the website, read the synopsis of my 4 books, and make a purchase, and you will have a signed copy on the way. Thank you for the support. Y'all see the title. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ancestor York, the greatest explorer in American history. That's right, we're going to be talking about Ancestor York, the greatest explorer in American history. Now, who is Ancestor York? Who is York? Who am I talking about? Family, York is the guy that made the Lewis and Clark expedition possible. Forget what everybody else told you about history. Understand history from your perspective. It was York that made the Lewis and Clark expedition successful. Check this out, family. Now, York was born somewhere around 1770 or 1775. Back during slavery, they didn't keep a lot of meticulous records on the enslaved African community, so a lot of individuals don't know the exact year of their birth. And we know that he died sometime after 1855. Now, the reason that I'm saying sometime after 1855 will make sense later when we get to the end of his story. Now, get this. York the Explorer was an American explorer and historic figure, being the only African-American member of the Lewis and Clark expedition. He participated in the entire exploration and made significant contributions to its success. He was the first African-American to cross the continent and see the Pacific. He has become an American icon, and several monuments depicting him were erected honoring his legacy. Now check this out, family. Now, York's father was a man named Old York, and his mother was a man named Rose. Now, York is described as having very, very dark skin. He is described as being a large man, 200 plus pounds, with short curly hair. Okay, and a lot of the information that we get about York is found in this book right here, The Journals of Lewis and Clark. Now, unfortunately, this volume that I have is not the complete journals of Lewis and Clark. So there are certain things that I would like to show you guys that I cannot show you in this book, but I can still tell you about it because it's documented journal entries. So what I want to do is I want to look into a few of these journal entries in the journals of Lewis and Clark and just look at a few instances where they mentioned the great explorer, Ancestor York. So the first place we're going to go to, one of the earliest mentions of York in the journals, is found on page 48. Now, this entry was made October the 9th, 1804, and this is what it says. Much astonished at my black servant who did not lose the opportunity of displaying his powers, strength, etc., etc. This nation never saw a black man before. Now, what is he talking about? One of the guys that led the quote unquote Lewis and Clark expedition, a man named William Clark, he was the guy that owned York. William Clark was a slave owner, family, a despicable slave owner, and he owned York, and he inherited York from his father, John Clark III, who not only owned York but also owned his parents. So remember, with Lewis and Clark, Clark for sure, despicable individual. But we see right here in his journals that he is saying that this particular Indian nation that they met on their journeys exploring across the United States, across America, this nation of Indians had never saw a black man before. And you're going to see that theme come up over and over and over again in the journals. A lot of the Indian tribes were surprised to see someone who had as dark a skin as York had. If you notice in the journal entry of October 10th, he also says, Those Indians were much astonished at my servant. They never saw a black man before. All flocked around him and examined him from top to toe. He carried on the joke and made himself more terrible than we wished him to, though. Those Indians are not fond of spirits, liquor of any kind. So they loved him, but they were also kind of intimidated by York and afraid of York because he was a big, stocky man, very strong. And because he was so dark and they never saw an individual, a black man like that before in their lives, they were somewhat afraid of him, family. But let's look at another instance where they mentioned the great explorer York in the journals. Right here on October the 15th, a Monday, 1804, it says, "Those people were much pleased with my black servant. Their women very fond of caressing our men," etc. Now I want y'all to think about something. He keeps talking about how these Indians are so enamored with York. And so he mentions now how they are enamored with York, and he says that their women are very fond of caressing our men. I don't think they were very fond of caressing all of them. They were very fond of caressing York. That happened over and over and over and over again when you look throughout these journals. But check this out, family. We also have another mention of the great explorer York in the journals of Lewis and Clark. This took place on October 28th, a Sunday, 1804. It says, "We made up the presents and entertained several of the curious chiefs whom wished to see the boat, which was very curious to them, viewing it as great medicine, as they also viewed my black servant." So now they're talking about they viewed York as great medicine. Great medicine is magic, family. Great medicine is magic. Now, check this out. They also go on to have journal entries where they talk about York killing dinner for the crew. York killing an elk, York killing a buffalo. He was a very, very great hunter. He was strong, he was powerful. He was with the Lewis and Clark expedition from the beginning to his end. And York believed that because he had done so much for the expedition and he had done so much for history, he expected to receive his freedom at the end of the expedition. But since William Clark was such a despicable, low down, dirty, no good, filthy individual, even after great ancestor York made the Lewis and Clark expedition possible, family, he still refused to give York his freedom in the end. And York was forced to be enslaved to this man for several other years. And there's talk that he eventually sold him off because York continued to try to get his freedom. But I want y'all to think about something, family. When you have an individual like that, who has already shown that he can travel from one end of the country to the other, he can survive in swamps. He can survive in the mountains. He can survive in the valleys. He can survive in caves. He can survive in the wilderness. He can hunt and kill his own food. He can swim. He can climb trees. He's a survivalist, and he's already proven his worth. And he knows the terrain, and he knows the tribes. Ask yourself this, family. How long do you think you can keep a man like that enslaved? Exactly. Not that long. And so eventually we don't 100% know what happened to York, but there's an interesting tale that may explain what actually happened to York in the end. There was a fur trader who wrote in his memoirs, and he told of meeting twice a Negro man living among the Crow Indians in Wyoming. And he is saying that this Negro man that was living among the Crow Indians in Wyoming, or what we know as Wyoming today, said that he had first came to that area with Lewis and Clark. The fur trader went on to say that the Negro man was living well amongst the Crow Indians and being treated as a chief who had 4 wives. Now I'm going to tell you something, family. That's the ending of the story that I believe. I believe that York escaped got his freedom, went and lived amongst the Crow, and because of who he was, because they loved him like they did on his expedition, he eventually became chief or had real high ranking status within the tribe. He had 4 wives and he lived out the rest of his days like a boss. Now I want to tell you guys something. There's a lot of monuments to York around this country, as well they should be, because York the Explorer is the greatest explorer in American history. This is your brother Matthew Daniels, aka I'm Pooh, aka the Chosen Few, aka the Real Bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm, world. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die.